Cheers. Sometimes you cosplay a character from a musical that you love, probably your like favorite musical of all time, and then you decide to do an entire YouTube video about how much you love the show, how you think it's broke musical code, and why the production company of the show is so great. We're talking about the guy who didn't like musicals.
The last remaining story to tell. The guy who didn't like musicals.
I've loved Starkid and their productions since I was in middle school, but the guy who didn't like musicals always has been top tier for me, and let's get into why. In the wise words of Agatha Harkness, in order to go forward, you have to go back.
Bravo!
Starkid Productions, aka Team Starkid, aka Starkid Potter, aka we're just gonna call them Starkid. They're an American musical theater company founded in 2009 at the University of Michigan. They're supposedly founded by 4 members, though, I mean, no one else was in the room where it happened. I hated that. Matt Lang, Nick Lang, Brian Holden, Darren Criss. Matt and Nick were writers. They wanted to get into writing parody stuff and musicals. Brian is Brian. He's America's sweetheart. Need you say more? And Darren is Darren. Not America's sweetheart, but America's. And we love him. They created a show back over 10 years ago now called A Harry Potter Musical.
Harry, what the hell are you doing over here? You missed the raffle!
Quoted on their website, the show was made on a shoestring budget, free to attend, and ran for 1 weekend. One of the 4 performances was recorded and uploaded to YouTube as a Harry Potter musical, because that was easier than making DVDs for the cast and crew. And thus, 10 years ago, Starkid was born. Little did we know that much more than just the cast would be watching. Oh, buddy! In 2009, that's the beginning of peak Tumblr. Oh, buddy. Needless to say, Tumblr got a hold of this piece of brilliance and blew it up. They ended up releasing 2 more Potter musicals, a Harry Potter sequel and a Harry Potter senior year with almost entirely the same cast, depending on the show. They made appearances at LakeyCon, went on tour a few times, all kinds of stuff. It was the big thing. Oh yeah. As Starkid evolved, they started to do more parody musicals on different franchises, including Twisted, Holy Musical Batman, Annie, and others. And they even branched out to genre musicals a little bit more recently. You have Trail to Oregon and Starship there for that. And in the process of doing those genre musicals, Matt and Nick have specifically challenged themselves. And they've always done this. They've been very good about this. There are stories that, while still a parody, are very investing to watch. You do still get entrapped by the characters. Their favorite genre just so happens to be horror. And they had several different directions they wanted to go with horror. So they decided to make a few different musicals. So now they have 12 different musicals, 704,000 subscribers on YouTube. And the guy who didn't like musicals specifically has currently around 4.8 million views on YouTube, which is arguably their most watched show, but it's hard to wage because their first shows were uploaded in segments because YouTube used to have a time constraint on videos. So Starkid through the years has become a bit of an enigma to people that aren't really in on it, if you know what I mean. They performed in Michigan, Chicago, and now they perform in LA. And back in Chicago, the Chicago Tribune did a piece on them, and my favorite section from the piece is, wait, what is Team Starkid? A new media theater production company. What does that even mean, dude? New media theater production company? The theater's like alive, dude. What? Looking at the approaches of social media from musicals, as we are in a social media age, a good issue musicals face in trying to utilize social media is that they are solid projects that are trying to advertise themselves. So their pages, for instance, the Mean Girls Instagram, is almost entirely just ads. So why are you following a page that is just essentially ads, unless you already know what it's about, you're excited to see it, you're gonna go see it, etc., etc. There's not a lot of huge innovation on these pages and what they provide content-wise, so they do kind of struggle in proving the point in their existence. Starkid is not a single piece of art, though. It is a cycle, a reoccurring thing, because it is a company, not just a musical. So they have a leg up. If Broadway theaters were to start pages and perhaps show the process of shows being created, they'd find more success in the utilization of social media, but they're not going to. And the same thing kind of happens with a lot of places that aren't restricted to being companies or the theaters themselves making social media. When ingesting that of Starkid's content, it's as if you're there along the whole ride. You get to see the backstage process. You see the pre-production with their Kickstarters and what they're planning out. You get to see how it all shakes out through social media, and then you get to actually see the final product on screen on YouTube.
Editing me in the dark, here to say that I totally skipped over that that's like kind of a big deal that they put their shows for free on YouTube when they're done, because it makes their shows super accessible since they only perform them in one location. And I can only hope that accessibility for theater just grows and we adapt to use that more here in the future post-pandemic. Looking at you, Broadway. I think after Hamilton's success on Disney Plus, it might become more normalized again, because I'm kind of done watching Shrek the Musical and the Into the Woods filmings that have lived on Netflix for like too many years. Let's bring something new on, please, so I don't have to watch bad bootlegs anymore. Thank you.
In having this major following online, they've developed a system that allows them to be able to constantly create new projects too, which is really cool, and even allow them to grow. Having a dedicated fan base allows for them to utilize Kickstarter as a major resource in order to raise money for theater, because at the end of the day, we all know theater's expensive. Oh me, oh my. So in general, it's just a really cool thing that they're able to do. They're able to promise their audience content, which is really hard to promise as a theater company typically. And this show had a huge new resurgence of respect. So they have a lot of new followers. Enough of this like pre-blah blah blah whatever. Let's talk about the freaking show. The synopsis on the Starkid website is: everything in Hatchetfield seems normal until people began singing. Then they began dancing, and now a musical pandemic is sweeping the entire city. Okay, that's funny. This show came out way before COVID, so it's just fun. Did they predict? Anyway, it's up to Paul, an average guy who doesn't like musicals, and his friends to stop this musical apocalypse and fight for humanity's future. The show's a parody of musicals alongside that of science fiction horror from, honestly, I'd go to the 1960s as its initial influence, but a lot of horror influences throughout the years too. You have a lot of tropes utilized throughout the show that mirror that of typical horrors. I think the most obvious is Last Woman Standing, as I'm dressed as today, and utilizes a lot of their typical tropes that Starkid even has, which we'll get into. Why is The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals different from other productions, whether it be from Starkid Productions or just other musicals in general? How does it break the musical code? Well, here's the thing. It's a musical made for everyone. Like literally everyone, including people that don't like musicals. I know, theater kids, what you're saying in your head. Yeah, right. They done did it. You can show this show to a good majority of musical hating audiences and they will respect it to a certain extent, unless they're just a-holes. And if they're a-holes, why are you watching a show with them? Get better friends. If we want to first look at this as a winning musical in the words of Stephen Sondheim, let's go. Let's get at it. Whips out Sondheim cosplay. I don't have a Sondheim cosplay. All it generally takes to woo that of a musical audience member is to have a solid book, score, and maybe even an awesome main character. Looking at The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals, the solid story structure points all hit. It has the basic hero's journey as we follow Paul, or even if you were to follow Emma, through the production. Here's some plot maps to prove my point. You can pause and look at them if you want. If you're not lame though, we're gonna keep going. The show also provides that of a dramedy. And dramedies as a whole, in the terms of storytelling in the year 2021 specifically, are the types of genres people want to see. The comedy always hits in this show. It is the typical Starkid humor, but why does it work? Well, if you refer to the UCB Manual of Improv, they utilize a lot of the comedy elements in Starkid shows the same way you would utilize the comedy elements in improv shows. It's all based in truth at the end of the day, and that is how you make the most successful performing comedy. They don't play their cards all at once, and they're also very masterful in the art of reference. That's just always been their thing, though. They make parody musicals. My voice is gone. Let's go back. Anyway. Also, they generally could do whatever the F they want, and it's usually funny. As long as it's based in some truth, they're getting somewhere. The relatability aspect we will get into here in a little bit with the awesome main character element, but basing the story in truth allows for not just the comedy to come out, but also the drama aspects. This story, in essence, is a tragedy, as most horrors supposedly are. Also, looking at songs like Not Your Seed, this song can be both very funny and have very funny digs, like this line, for instance.
Did you know Mom let Deb sleep over? What? And you're right about Deb, she's a hardcore stoner.
I knew it!
But then the next line might have you start to tear up.
If I turned my insides out, would you even know that I was there? Why does it hurt to love you? Why does it hurt to love?
Then as you realize that the framing of the song is a man watching his dead daughter be paraded around like a puppet by some alien blue musical bacteria. Devastating. Way more digestible when framed with some comedic elements. The score. Jeff Blinn wrote the score of this show, and it does stay in tradition to most of the scores from Starkid. Starkid's really good at writing musicals for the actor. The actors are given songs that aren't so hard that they have to frame it the specific way that it's written. They can do what they need to do to shape it to their performance in the way that they decide to portray the character. One of the biggest issues I have with a lot of Broadway musicals is the writing of the songs specifically. It's not necessarily the score playing in the background, but the specific songs in which characters are singing are made in a way where they're required to be sang one way. Now, when you have a Broadway show, for instance, and it's going to cycle through different actors, it's not going to be performed the same way every time. Every actor's rendition of a character is going to be different. Every approach is different because every human experience is different. Hi, welcome to The Human Condition. My name is Anna Heartbeat. Looking at Jeff Blinn's song in the show himself, he's able to challenge himself in a way that works for him.
I want you to want.
Just allows for the actor to mold it to the way they want. If they don't want it to be too hard, it doesn't have to be too hard. It doesn't push them too hard. Even looking at Paul's character in Let It Out, there's no real push there. It's not like they have to sing these high notes if they don't want to. But if they do want to attempt it and try it, they can. It's just made so that the actor can make the performance most authentic as possible for them.
I've never been happy. Wouldn't that be nice? Is this the secret? Singing and dancing through life.
Also, it utilizes the same pop rock influence that every Starkid show has had, but typically they do it in a way that's authentic to those genres, so it's not too musically, which is one of my biggest issues with pop rock musicals, is that it's still like musically and has the tropes in it, so it doesn't quite hit right. This show's the only show I would say actually really does that, besides Black Friday 2, I'd say, but I think that with this show, it is on purpose because it's a musical parody. And last but not least, the main character. You have to have an awesome main character. The main character in this show is the most paradox main character in a musical because it's a guy who doesn't like musicals. Genius. Paul is such an amazing character, and Emma's such an amazing character. They're both the main characters in my eyes. They're both protagonists. I don't see one as a side character to the other. I do think it's framed to be in that of Paul's favor because of the fact it's a horror, but I also think you can very well watch it in Emma's shows and get the same experience. We all know the person that hates musicals. He might be it. We all are pretty self-aware with musicals too, in that they're not flawless. They're pretty flawed medium if you think about it, because it's forcefully abstract. His character in general too is just a very relatable character, as he is, like most people, just minding his own business and trying to get by. Another thing that could be mentioned about Paul that's really important is that he is a voice of reason character and the main character. I know that that's a trope that we have gotten sick of recently. We kind of like following crazy kooky people. But I think that in terms of story structure for musicals, it makes the most sense to make the main character the voice of reason character, as musicals in and of itself tend to be very chaotic. It's a little bit more easy to follow, a little more digestible. This is also framed by Emma too. Emma does that as well. Emma's probably even the bigger voice of reason character in this show, if we're being honest. In general, it's just a really well done musical. But the reason it appeals to all audiences, including people that don't like musicals, is it's not reliant on being a musical. Musicals' biggest flaws are that they're musicals, and I know that just doesn't make any sense in stating that, but listen here, okay? I'm looking at musicals as a medium. They obviously derive from plays in the past, what have you, and we are music just because it's like nice, fun to listen to, and then soon we made them similar to that of asides within shows. And with asides, you know, you're taking yourself out in a way that people generally do with their thoughts. People don't think in song though, so that's kind of the issue that some people always have. The other biggest issue is that the modern audience eye in the year 2021, but also even in 2018, when the show came out, is that we are living in a hyper-realistic point of view when we want to watch things. We like things laid out for us, and we like them to be as relatable as possible, so we rely on hyper-realism. Here's some examples for the group, okay? When you go to watch a movie, have you ever thought at the end of it, man, there were some plot holes in that? Or did you ever think, I'm really unsatisfied with the ending. I don't know what happens next. They didn't tell me. Or maybe if you're an award show person, you think the actors that deserve the awards best are the ones that played the most truthfully. Our society, music society, at least in the United States, are very much of the belief that things need to be as realistic as possible. We look for things at a hyper-realistic point of view. Even looking at award shows, we tend to award people that play real people, like real life people. Like the amount of times biopics win, oh my god. And the only reason we do is we have physical proof that their performance was realistic enough to deserve that award. I'd say that this has become a thing starting in the 90s. I think we were able to allow ourselves into abstraction more up until the 80s. Looking at musicals though, musicals are arguably an abstract genre in and of itself because nobody sings out of the middle of nowhere. It's a weird genre. Musicals, you know, derive from that of vaudeville a lot, and in vaudeville, the goal was to just entertain by doing fun things to look at. Vaudeville is very similar to that of early YouTube videos and memes because it's just something go haha funny. Musicals were made essentially to just provide general entertainment. The story didn't have to be brooding or sad or prove a point at the beginning the same way that theater has been like for a while. As time has progressed and we've gotten into them more, we've decided to view them in more of an artistic way. Film's gone through the same thing too. We first made film to be like those sneezing man videos, and now we expect them to be complete, fully finished works of art deep in the idea of hyperrealism. With musicals, nowadays, because we know they can't be hyper-realistic, we have to rely on them being based in a story we already know. You could have these kinds, aka film adaptations, or you can have these kinds, historical adaptations. These are almost always the most successful musicals we see in today's Broadway world because they're stories we already know, so nothing needs to be laid out to us, but it is a new way to digest it. Still though, it's not everybody's cup of tea because people are breaking out of song in the middle of nowhere, and some people are uncomfortable with that. What is the solution to that? How do you get people who don't like that aspect of musicals into musicals? That's where the argument of diegetic versus non-diegetic musicals comes into play. In my humble opinion, I find that diegetic musicals are a lot more successful than that of non-diegetic musicals overall. You have your diegetic and you have your non-diegetic sound in your story. And for musicals, almost all of them are non-diegetic. Non-diegetic is when sound comes into play, particularly music, that isn't actually going to happen in the story. For instance, Imperial March in Star Wars. Diegetic is it's happening in real time in that scene or whatever, like the cantina in Star Wars. For musicals, almost all of them are non-diegetic because they're typically musical asides. They're what people are thinking, visuals in the scene to help move the story along, things like that. In The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals, for instance, it is a diegetic musical in that we are handed these people's songs because that is what they are actually singing in the moment because they are taken over by like a little alien bacteria thing that makes them sing musicals. They're musical zombies. I think diegetic musicals are more successful overall because they are not reliant in moving the story along, and not everybody can follow that of musical lyrics all the time because you can't rely on the performer to enunciate in song as well as they can in lines. Looking at diegetic musicals through the years, like Once and Cabaret, they're typically shaped in a performance state of mind. This is a performance that you're watching in a cabaret or in a bar in Ireland. that do help provide emotion for the story, but you don't necessarily have to listen to the lyrics to get where the story's going. Two Ladies has like nothing to do with the story, but if you are able to fully understand these ideals and listen to the lyrics well, you're gonna get the point tenfold. But even if you miss it, you're still gonna get the general feeling from the music happening, but also just the way the story's being told. But The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals, it's not in a performance framing, it is in, well, it kind of is. Because these alien things are performing these songs in the real-time thing that's happening in the show. But at the same time, you could argue they are bursting out of songs. I just find that this can be the most successful because it's the easiest to understand and the most easily given to an audience member to move a story along no matter what. And at the end of the day, your real goal in telling a story is making sure that the story gets across, even if there's a point or not. The last point I want to make about The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals is the fact that it is a parody of musicals. You have everything from the dramatic
Lights down! Oh my god.
to the entirety of Working Boys.
This is humanity's 11th hour.
Let's talk about that number while we're at it, just to prove this point. It's not pointing their finger and laughing at musicals thinking that they're better, which a lot of comedy tends to rely on these days. It is that, and it's being self-aware. It's saying, we're a musical, we're doing this, but so are all the other musicals. We are no better than them. We are a problem too. But ain't it funny that we like this stuff, you know? So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I liked talking about the show so much. I love Starkid stuff, and I loved having more than one reason to dress up as Emma. If you want to see more musical commentaries, I have a degree in performing arts, so I'd like to put it to use. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a good day. Drink some Sunny D if you feel like it. That's kind of cute, right? Yum yum. All right, bye.